TD Ryan Unleashed is brought to you by Scott Zyman, your State Farm insurance agent. Scott can help you save money bundling your home and auto insurance. Call 815-748-3101 or stop by at 2587 Sycamore Road, Suite D in DeKalb. Like a good neighbor, Scott Zyman and State Farm are there. Pizza Villa, pizza, pasta, sandwiches, and more at 824 West Lincoln Highway in DeKalb. For delivery or pickup, call 815-758-8116 or go to pizzavilla.com. My Insurance Guys in Sycamore, family owned, local, reliable. My Insurance Guys cover Medicare to auto and everything in between. Call us in Sycamore at 815-899-0950. My Insurance Guy, business, auto, home, life, and health at myinsurancegui.com. And Eldercare Services of DeKalb County, safe, secure, and supported, helping you stay at home where you want to be. Call 815-758-6550 or stop in at 1701 East Lincoln Highway in DeKalb or on the web at ecsdekalb.org. And welcome into TD Ryan Unleashed, Suicide Prevention Show number 1, and we couldn't have better guests to do that. We have with us, of course, from the Mental Health Board, Deanna, Cada. Deanna, how you doing, my dear?
Oh, doing great, TD, and happy to be here.
Thank you so much for taking time this morning. And we have Sherman from the Ben Gordon Center and also the Living Room. We're anxious to learn more about that. Katie, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you both for being here. Again, it's an honor and a privilege. You know, I was telling Deanna off the air that we've done this show since 2007. Chuck Seabrass, who heard a PSA that we ran, where Clark Flatt lost his son to suicide, and we were running a PSA, and he heard the PSA on WLBK, and he said, you guys ever thought about doing a show about suicide? And I initially said, well, nobody wants to talk about suicide. And then as we got further into discussing this, we realized that everybody, much like cancer, everybody's been touched by suicide, either they know somebody or a relative, and we thought it would be a very practical thing to do. So he was brave enough to share about losing his son that he discovered in his room, and it was very emotional, but yet Chuck was willing to share that because he wanted to help other people to not have the same thing happen to them. And doing the show, again, we did it over 15 years there, is so many brave people willing to step forward and sharing, because, you know, it used to be taboo, and we interviewed several people that said, well, their uncle committed suicide, but we never talk about that, and we say that uncle died in a different way, and you never even mention that. And I think we are a little more enlightened as a society now, but tell us about that, Deanna, just on your own thoughts about suicide and before you got involved in what you're doing.
So I think one of the great things that your show and other things in the media have done is to shine a light on it. That suicide prevention, just like all things, needs to be talked about. It isn't something that's whispered about in secret, because the prevention piece is the piece we really need to be thinking about. How do we get to zero suicide within our community? And so I've been really lucky that in my career, I've had lots of opportunities to talk about suicide prevention and ways that the community can support people who aren't feeling well to really reach out and get some help.
I love that. The ounce of prevention, you know, it's an old expression, but there's a lot to be said for that, isn't there?
Yes, there is, and it's possible. I think that sometimes people feel suicide is hopeless and helpless, and it is not. There are definitely things that we can do to help people get to where they need to be, where they're feeling like they can survive what's happening to them.
Oh, very good. Now, Katie, how about yourself? We want to talk about the Ben Gordon Center and the things that are going on there, but let's talk about Katie, just by yourself. And what were your thoughts about suicide before you started doing what you're doing now, and has that changed?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think I was part of the, I don't know if we should talk about it, club. You know, I think as mental health has touched myself, my friends, my family, it's definitely something that I'm obviously much more passionate about talking about, because it does affect us all. Like Deanna,
I always heard it's like a pebble in the water. They drop the pebble in the water, and then those ripple effects.
Absolutely. If it's not something that you are struggling with yourself, it's something that maybe you know someone or you love someone that is. And so I think, like Deanna was saying, that prevention piece is so important. It's so valuable. When I was going through my own struggles, I really wanted to take some of that power back and use my story, my illness, my struggles to support others, because that peer voice is really valuable in prevention. To hear that from another individual that's been through it, they've kind of walked the walk, and they can support you through that. That really does make a difference.
That's interesting you would say that, because we've had the honor of interviewing several veterans about suicide, and we talked to this one gentleman about they were sitting in a circle, and the gentleman got a letter. It was a Dear John letter, and he, as he said it, he swallowed his rifle right there in front of me. I committed suicide right in front of a group of about 6 guys, and they all, then you're supposed to go back to normal, then you're supposed to go back to life and just live life normal. I mean, how can you witness something like that and go on with your life in a normal fashion? But something I learned from the Marines in particular is that, we'd always talk about courage and what courage is. And the Marines talked about the fact that asking for help was the most courageous thing that they could do because, especially with Marines, you pick yourself up by bootstraps, you'll be fine, rub some dirt on it. But for them to actually ask for help, that's where the real courage comes in.
And those post-vention pieces are so critical because, like you said, that ripple effect impacts people. And so making sure that if you witness something, if you have a loved one that died by suicide, that that there's help out there. And with veterans especially, there is a lot of very specific services for veterans by veterans. Because as Katie said, that peer piece is so critical. And so there is lots available out there to support veterans from people who understand what they've been through and their unique experience.
That's what they want. They want to talk to other veterans who've been there and done that. So that's again what I'm talking about. So let's hit some hard numbers here. Again, this is the fiscal 2024 suicide prevention report from the Illinois Department of Public Health. And sometimes you have to hit people over the head with numbers. And unfortunately, on the average, now there's the national numbers and there's Illinois numbers. On the average, 11 minutes, every 11 minutes, a person dies by suicide nationally. In Illinois, every 5 hours and 41 minutes, a person dies by suicide. A total number of deaths by suicide increased 2.6% from 2021 to 2022. I want to talk to you guys about the COVID effect of that. The numbers of deaths by suicide increased 7% in Illinois from 2021 to 2022. And the third stat, the suicide rates among males in 2022 were 3.9 times higher than the rate among females. The suicide rate among males in 2022 was 3.6 times higher than those in the females. And we know that men complete the act more often because often they'll use a violent method to do so. Often police officers and military with the gun and using that.
One of the things I love, Chidi, about you talking about this is your man talking about it. Because men are notorious, and Katie probably has a lot more experience with this than I do, for not asking for help, for stuffing their feelings, for using substances or other things to manage depression or anxiety or the things that they're dealing with. So reaching men is a real challenge. And I know that we have things planned in the future to really look specifically at men, but I think what you do is so critical as a man talking about suicide prevention. And I know, Katie, you probably have something you can jump in there with.
Oh yeah, I think, in my experience in the living room, it's very few and far between that we have a man coming in and, making that first step, that courageous first step, to walk in the door of a building maybe you've never been to talk to a group of people that you've never met before. It takes a very, very big step, and that is an act of bravery to do so. And it's definitely something that, especially like older men, when they have that rhetoric of, pick yourself up by the bootstraps.
That's what they were told, yeah.
It's not something that's even mental health. I don't even know what that is. And so it's always really rewarding and important to see individuals like that coming in and asking for that support and leaning into these new models like the living room and those crisis services, because we are available 24/7 and we're not billing your insurance, we're free. So it's a great place to start that journey.
Oh, very good. I remember watching a special on the History Channel about World War I, and they call it the 1 mile stare, where somebody was just shell shocked, but they didn't know what that was then, so they just put that guy in the corner of the room and then just went on what they're doing and just sent him back home and just deal with things when you get home. So again, very scary stuff. Now I want to talk about this, the contact, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Deanna, you had some stuff about that. Tell us about that, please.
So 988 replaced the suicide hotline number. The government and people involved.
So it used to be 1-800-SUICIDE, right?
It did. But they want to make it simple. Let's make sure that people can access help as quickly as possible. So now, if somebody is not feeling well, or if they have a loved one they're concerned about, they can call 988. They're connected to somebody who understands suicidology. And
a trained professional, right?
A trained professional, and who can get immediate assistance if it's needed. And so 988 has a number. You can hit number 1 if you're a veteran and get specific veteran services.
Oh, great.
So it's been around for about 2 years, and we've definitely seen the call numbers go up there because it is doing what it's meant to do, which is be there available for people. I also know sometimes people are like, I have this loved one who's not feeling well. What do I do? You can call 988 and ask them. They will help you manage what's happening with your loved one. And so it's not just for the people themselves who call, but the loved ones as well.
And that call is so critical, right? Because when they finally work up the courage to make that call, God forbid they misspell suicide or something, and to dial 998, it's just that simple, and they'll get right through, right?
Yep, 988, they can get right through to the person who can help them kind of manage through that crisis. And according to the statistics, 80% of the calls can be handled by the person on the other line, at the end of the line at 988. And then about 20% might need additional assistance, which is where the employees at Ben Gordon Center come into play.
Right.
They will come out and help people who are in those crisis situations. So it has really been a great opportunity. I do want to say specifically for our LGBTQIA plus listeners that 988 used to have a connection to the Trevor Project that actually went away, but the Trevor Project is still up and going. And if somebody calls 1-866-488-7386, that is LGBTQIA plus specific support for somebody who is going through a rough time.
Well, one of the advantages of doing the podcast is you can go back and play that, but give them that phone number again one more time, please.
It is 1-866-488-7386. That's the Trevor Project, and it supports people who are LGBTQIA plus, which often are a higher number of calls when we're talking about suicide intervention.
All right, very good. And Katie, Deanna mentioned about you going out, and because I know we talked to David Bird from the DeKalb Police Department, and we know there's social workers that will go out on certain calls. Can you tell us what that is like? And are you like, in other words, are you on standby with the police department?
Yeah, so we have a few different programs that can provide that mobile crisis support. When 988, maybe they're talking to someone that they need someone there, then they would reach out to our crisis team, our MCAT team, our mobile crisis assessment team. And we have people on call at all times. So we would send out a clinician and a peer. We do really want to maintain that peer focus, that peer support. And we would go out to that individual's place. We've gone to like Buffalo Wild Wings before. So we'll meet you where you're at.
Okay.
During the work week, Monday through Friday, we have our police social workers. So that's kind of what Bert was talking about. And that would be, they would co-respond on those mental health calls.
So who makes the call when we decide to call you guys in? When we're making a police call, who makes that call to bring you guys in at that point?
Well, the individual they can call like 911 and they can request a social worker.
Oh, okay.
Or if it's someone that maybe, we've seen in the living room, maybe we did a mobile crisis response the day before, we can loop in our social workers, our police social workers, and say, hey, can you follow up with this person? Or I know they were really having a rough week. They didn't want to come into the living room. Maybe we can try to engage with that individual.
Yeah, I know they've done a lot. We're trying to get officers trained, but again, there's so much ground to cover there. So
yeah.
What does that look like? So when this is, you get a call, maybe a domestic violence call, they call you in there and to kind of settle things down. I think it used to be where one of the persons had to be arrested if you called, but that no longer is true. What would you guys do? Come in there and try to settle things down and say, I can work with the wife, you can work with the husband, and how does that, what does that look like?
Our primary goal is that de-escalation, is trying to meet that person where they're at. I can't speak fully on like what their process is. Obviously, we take safety as the priority for both the individual and the social worker that's entering the scene. Obviously, the people that are going in, our social workers, are very well trained on de-escalation. They know how to talk to individuals that are going through something, if it's domestic violence, if it's substance abuse, if it's suicidality. So they're going to go in and they're really going to assess like, what does this person need? What are they identifying as a need? And trying to meet that person where they're at.
Okay, very good. Yeah, because so often you see that too, where oftentimes the couple will turn on the officer then, because then he becomes the enemy or she becomes the enemy too. So that's great that you guys are intervening like that. We're talking about the suicide prevention show here on the TD Ryan Unleashed. Now, I was going through these stats and I was surprised by this one, the impact of COVID. And I understand a lot of people suffered mentally there. We were actually going down with the suicide rate in Illinois before 2020. And then we went up 13% from that time. What was that as far as, Katie, with the problem with the COVID? Obviously, people living amongst each other without limited availability to get out and amongst, but 13%, that's a pretty high
Yes,
increase.
Absolutely. I think that isolation piece, having to do, some people were laid off. A lot of people were laid off. They were quarantined in their homes. Life looked different during that time. I think for people that were in school at that time, or they really relied on that fulfillment from their job. Like I know at that time I was working in food service, and we completely closed our doors. So I had to pivot. And then it's also hard if you're working in one of those essential jobs, and you're wearing those masks, and life looks different. And that's hard to cope with, especially when maybe you weren't really in tune to some of the things you were doing, and how you were feeling. You were just kind of going through work and all those things, and then it kind of all sets in, and it catches up.
Sure, you're down already, and then here comes this COVID thing.
Exactly, yeah, and it's hard to sit with those feelings sometimes if it's not something that you're used to sitting with. And you're already feeling like withdrawn, and that was a hard time, I think, for a lot of people. And that's where our need came in for more support.
Yeah, and I have the pleasure of talking to a lot of kids from the high schools here locally too, and they had to go through that. And they missed a whole, a lot of things with the COVID too, and how they mentally got through that. And it was very interesting to talk to them about how they did get through that, and then, and looking at how much worse it could have been, which I thought was great that they realized that it could have been worse than it was. And let's talk about this now, Deanna. Who's committing suicide? Because there's all kinds of stats. You can break down the stats any number of ways. But here they talk about specifically non-Hispanic black males and females showed a greatest increase in crude suicide rates from 2018 to 2020. Hispanic females and non-Hispanic black females showed the greatest increase in suicide rates from 2020 to 2021. Now, I know male, like we talked about, males tend to complete the act, but now we have more women attempting suicide.
And once again, I think some of this goes back to, and I hate using the word stigma, Katie. I wish there was a better word,
I
right?
know, yeah.
But that people aren't asking for help because they don't want to be seen as needing assistance. And so when we start talking about young black women or young Hispanic women, those are populations that maybe either think that they need to do it on their own or don't have a comfort person that they can share with and talk to. And so it's reminding ourselves that every population is vulnerable, and that we need to, as Katie keeps saying, meet people where they're at, but also have the right people to meet them where they're at. And so making sure that our workforce, that our volunteers, that our peers match the population we're serving, so that we have young black therapists that can help young black women, that we have Hispanic and Spanish-speaking therapists that can
Just
help.
like we talked about the veterans, they want to talk to other veterans. I mean, it's understandable.
Absolutely. And I want to just push back on another population that I think really relates to the COVID number, which are the elderly. And we saw huge increases. Overall number of suicide deaths remained stable, but when we looked at 2023, rates were highest among adults aged 85 and older. And I think that goes back to what Katie said about it's really that loneliness epidemic, right? When you don't have somebody that you're connected to, that depression and that loneliness can really be all consuming. And the importance then of making sure that we're caring for and checking in on each other, that if we have elderly people in our lives, that we're checking in with them, that we have some sort of connection to people, because that's just, it's a protective factor. It's part of that prevention. And I think that it's just so key that people need to realize that we need each other to get through this.
I got laid off by the radio station, and for a couple of weeks I was out of work there. And, to wake up with nothing to do, nothing with no purpose, boy, that just really grates on you. And I can imagine the seniors were doing that, and just, why get up today? Because who's going to care if I get up or not? So, again, that's a very important thing. Illinois, we're talking about prevention. That's so key, right? Because we're talking about not after the fact what should have been done, but Illinois has a suicide prevention strategy. I just want to touch on these real quick. And tell us about healthy and empowered individuals, families, and communities. So, in other words, everybody's got to be involved, whether you're struggling right now or not, right?
So it's so funny. I am really bad at prevention because I just want to yell at everybody and say, don't do anything bad. Don't harm yourself. Take care of yourself. It's important. And that strategy doesn't work. And so these strategies that the public health folks have come up with, and then our suicide prevention committee locally has come up with some really awesome strategies. We have wonderful things coming up that this group came up with. And the group includes so many local organizations, Project Seth, NAMI, Family Service Agency, and the lead is Northwestern Medicine. They received a grant to be able to come do this. And so one of the things we're doing is a student art fair. That's one of the strategies. And guess what? Yelling at kids and telling them not to harm themselves is not the strategy there. So
Right.
Katie, if she wants to talk a little bit about what the positive spin on all of this is when we talk about prevention.
Yes, I think what we see a lot is art and creativity as being something that can really engage and inspire people and aid in their recovery. So that youth art show, that student art show, it's a creative showcase for youth to express messages of hope and resilience, things that maybe they're depicting their struggles, their illness, and it can be very another individual seeing that, they can really relate to that and see how maybe a way that you feel, something you can't see, can be depicted, and begin that conversation and offer like, well, if this is something that you've been through or you're feeling, there are available supports.
We talk to our friends from Casa, and they work with the children, and they say so often they'll have the child just paint a picture or paint a drawing, and they can take so much from that drawing, can't they?
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot that I think subconsciously, when we are really kind of tapping into the way that we're feeling, that we're also depicting either on paper or in a drawing, or even like different forms of poetry or spoken word. Those ways of creative mediums is really helpful, and something that in the living room we use a lot to engage people in their recovery. So bringing that to students, to youth, to other individuals that are impacted is really powerful.
I saw a picture of a young child whose parents were fighting all the time, and she had drawn a big black cloud over their family. They had the family picture, and then a big black cloud over that. Just so symbolic there. Strategy 3 is healthcare providers. It's important that they know, right? Because learning more and more. Was that when they ask you if you feel safe at home and along those lines, or?
So that's absolutely part of it, right? So empowering health providers to ask those questions and normalizing those conversations. And one of the other things that Northwestern Medicine is doing, they've done it last year and this year, is training professionals on how to have those conversations around suicide and suicidology. Because what we found was a lot of clinicians and young people who are coming into the field have never had any practice at that. And it does take practice to ask somebody, are you feeling suicidal? Are you safe at home? Are you feeling like harming yourself? And so NM has these trainings where they're having those experiences to get comfort with it, because it is critical for healthcare professionals to be part of this prevention work that we're doing.
And that's a myth that we dispelled. The first show we did was that it's all right to ask somebody if they're thinking about committing suicide or hurting themselves, right? It's not going to give them the idea to do that.
Absolutely. The idea is already there if they're considering it. So putting that out there is not going to put it in their mind, and having them be able to respond. And then what do you do if they say, yes, I'm thinking of harming myself? And so having those tools, being able to call 988, being able to connect with a healthcare professional, being able to drive somebody to the living room so you can manage that situation, knowing what those options are is super important.
Now let's emphasize with the 988 call, as you had said earlier, you don't have to be the person suffering. You can be the person trying to deal with that person suffering. Don't be afraid to call 988, right?
Absolutely. I was in a situation where I taught a class at NIU, and I had a student that was in crisis. And we called the hotline. And I said, I have a student in crisis, and we kind of talked about what some strategies could be. And then the student said, you know what, I'll talk to them. And so was able to pass the phone to the student. That I was a professor. I wasn't, intimately involved with this student in a way that I knew them very well, but that was a resource I could use. And guess what? That student was able to get the help they needed and connected with their own therapist shortly after that.
That's
great. Success. And it wasn't scary. You can call. It's not scary.
Now, I had a buddy, the cry wolf syndrome, and he was a Marine and he got kicked out of the Marines, long story short. But he often talked about committing suicide, and we would, my buddies and I, we get angry, just because he kept doing it. It's like, shut up already, because we want to take it seriously, but if you keep doing it, then we, So tell us about that, Katie, if you can, just touch on that. What you want to be very careful with people, but that they're constantly doing. How do you get through to them that it's not good to say, I'm going to kill myself? I'm going to just, because that's what he would do all the time. So I'm just going to, and then we couldn't just leave that hang there. But then after years of that, we didn't know what to do with him.
Right, and I think it can be hard to have conversations like that over and over again. I think when someone is bringing it up, to me, that tells me that they're still struggling and they're still suffering. And maybe they're not at the point where they feel like they're going to attempt suicide, but they're still thinking about it. And I want to take that seriously. And again, approaching that person and not using suicide as a bad word. And having that conversation, that honest dialogue, that open dialogue, can be very powerful too, because I think it can make that conversation more accessible, and it can kind of cut down on our favorite word, stigma, that comes around those words. I think it was really powerful and important as I started to learn in the field. You can say the word suicide, you can have that honest conversation and begin to relate to that person, and then again finding a way to connect them with resources, to call 988, to utilize crisis services that are available in the community. There's 24/7 crisis line with Ben Gordon if we're talking about DeKalb County. And finding ways that we can link you with services, because maybe it's something that's persistent and ongoing. And so that's something that would be a great topic to talk about with a therapist or a psychiatrist. And how can we help you get that support?
All right, very good. I think you covered the fourth one. That's surveillance, research, and evaluation. And that's pretty much what you're talking about right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think if it's, and I think the therapists that I know have therapists, I think there's always something that we've got kind of, we're working through all those stressors. If we're having persistent suicidal thoughts and ideations, how can we ramp up that support for you? How can we connect you with a clinician or an individual that's trained to help you get through these things and manage those and get you into different group therapies or managing with coping skills? How can we get you into those rooms and those conversations?
Oh, very good. Yeah, there's a PSA on TV, I don't know if you ever saw it, where the kid's riding through his yard and he gets mad at the kid, and then the little old lady's bringing the garbage out and she complains about something. And then he puts these glasses on and he can see, and he said the kid, his parents are getting divorced and they're fighting all the time. The little old lady, she's dying of cancer, and he doesn't know. And to know what people are going and what they're going through would give us a lot more empathy, wouldn't it, as a society as a whole?
And what a great segue to what I wanted to share, which is there is also training available to members of the public to manage those conversations, like you were saying with your friend. Like, how do you manage a conversation where somebody keeps talking about that? How do you approach each person like they have something else going on in their life? So there's training available called Mental Health First Aid. Northwestern Medicine can offer that within the community. There's a way to get in contact with them to sign up for class, and it's generally free. And it helps give you the tools to manage those conversations, but not be the therapist, because there's professionals who can do it, but they can get you trained. So how do you get somebody from, I want to kill myself, to how do we get you some help? The Mental Health Board offers free QPR training, question, persuade, refer. It's online, it's an hour out of your time, and it gets you to the place where you can support somebody and then refer them to the professional that's going to assist them. And we have thousands of slots available for that kind of training. So if you're somebody who wants to support your loved one or your friend or that person who just keeps talking about it and you don't know what to do, there are free available trainings to community members to help that.
That's great. And so you tell, and how would we find out about that? How we do?
So you can always go to the Mental Health Board website, which is just DeKalbCounty.org, and you go to the Mental Health Department. We have that information right on our website, how to access that. You can also always call Northwestern Medicine. I'll let Katie give the phone number to do that. But to sign up for the mental health first aid training, they do that work there.
All right, very good.
Yeah, and the main number for Ben Gordon Center in Northwestern Medicine is 815-756-4875.
All right, and we'll give that again at the end of the program here. But, I come from an Irish Catholic family, and we spent a lot of time in the living room. Matter of fact, my grandmother wanted to put the plastic covering on the couch. And we're like, no, Grandma, we're not doing that. Because we spent time in the living room, we talked in the living room. Tell us about the Ben Gordon Center and the living room program. I just love the name, the living room program. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, and I think the living room, the name is supposed to kind of echo, that time that you spent in those comfortable spaces on those couches. The living room is a state-funded, grant-funded program. We're available 24/7, 365, and we're a free program for adults over the age of 18 in DeKalb County. We're a peer-run service, so we're really leaning into that peer model. We have recovery support specialists that are really leading those conversations, relating to the individual, meeting them where they're at and connecting them and supporting them in the way that the client or the guest is identifying.
That must be powerful when that person says, you know what, I almost committed suicide. I attempted suicide at one point. That must really just solidify.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's that relating to another person that's struggling. And I think sometimes we say in the living room, like, it can feel weird to have that conversation with someone and we have our name badges on and we're dressed business casual and all those things. But I mean, we have also struggled, and outside of work, we still struggle, and it's okay to struggle. You don't have to do it alone. And we can find ways that, you can call us, you can come in and we can support you, get you through your day. If you need more support, we can help provide that linkage. But again, it's having that conversation with someone and humanizing and normalizing those conversations.
Oh, very good. And so often, Deanna, we hear that where the person will say that after the other person committed suicide that, he seemed so happy or he was fine that day, and you think. But one of the things I've learned doing the show is, unfortunately, if you've committed to doing the act and you've actually planned it out, you are more relaxed and happy because you've decided to do it, right? Sadly as that may be.
So that's just it. I mean, in retrospect, post suicide, you can look back and say, well, I missed signs or I should have seen something, but they seemed happy or they, were satisfied with the way things going. But the truth is you can't know. You don't know what's in somebody's mind. And so that's why it's kind of, prevention's always part of what we're doing. And it's okay to acknowledge that somebody isn't feeling okay, right? It's like, hey, you know what? I've noticed that you seem happier, but I know you're really struggling. So what's going on? It's okay to acknowledge that somebody is having these thoughts, like Katie said, to really normalize it. But then to realize that that they might need more than you think. And the truth is you can't predict. So people post suicide can't be like, I should have known something. I should have done something. You can't know what's in somebody else's heart. All we can do is kind of those universal precautions and preventions.
Right.
That if we know somebody has struggled with suicide thoughts in the past, that we make sure that we're always kind of checking in with them.
Yeah, my best friend Dan in Denver, I lost, and he had gotten all kind of financial trouble, and he got a girl pregnant, and he was just in a real bad situation. And I was moving back to Chicago, and he was going to come move back with me. We're going to get an apartment. And, long story short, and he ended up committing suicide. He ended up taking all his childhood toys down in the garage in the car, and then turned the car on. And he knew that his mom was going to find him. He was living with his mom, and I got so mad. Like, why would you do that? You know, who's going to find you? Your mom's going to find you. If I had a chance to talk to him, I would yell at him because I was mad that he did that. And I just, but as you just said, Deanna, you can't get into his head. I couldn't get to where he was, where he's grabbing his childhood toys, going down the car and turning the car on. I mean, we can't get to where they're at, right? So.
Right. And nobody knows somebody else's heart unless they let them in to share it. And so the truth is, it can be an instantaneous decision, right? It doesn't have to be something you've been planning for months.
Right.
You could wake up one day and say, this is the day. And that's why we always have to just make sure that we're checking in with people and offering them other solutions. But that doesn't mean that you can save them, right? Giving them the resources is the best thing that you can do because you just don't know where somebody's at. And so we have to always treat people like they could be at some place where they need some assistance.
And another aspect that we'll get into here in future shows is the guilt afterwards, because I felt immense guilt because I thought if I just would have had Dan come out, everything would have been all right. And they had one of the guests explain to me that you don't have that kind of power over people. You like to think you do, but if I would have just said, "Oh, Dan, come on out now," that wouldn't have made everything all sunshine and lollipops at that point. So we can't beat ourselves up for that, right?
And I'm so glad you're going to do a future show on that because that's really critical because post-suicide is a real dangerous time for the friends and family of somebody who did that. And so talking about that guilt, that I should have seen something, done something, very powerful, and I'm glad you're going to do that, Katie.
Thank you. And Katie, now when we talk more about the Ben Gordon Center here, it's very simplified this. For services provided include case management, we can understand that, support and advocacy, psychiatry, consumer employment services. That's the one that stopped me. Now tell us about that. What is consumer employment services?
I'm glad you asked. I think that's one of the hidden gems of our services. That is like IPS is what we call that. So we have like case managers that are devoted to people that are where getting and maintaining a job has been hindered by their mental health or their mental illness. And so they would provide that case management support, that advocacy. They'll help you find a job that you enjoy, one that will give you that fulfillment and give you that productivity, not just something that you need to do to get by. They want to find something that's going to be fulfilling. And then when challenges come up in the workplace, they are so amazing about going in and having conversations with your employer or employees and really kind of trying to support that person and maintaining and being successful in the workforce.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So the thing, Bob Johnson, he's always moody all the time. That's what Bob, And then you find out what Bob's going through, right? And then it's a whole different world. And keeping that job is important because I was telling you guys when I was out of work there, I got very depressed at that point.
Yeah, and I think I'm definitely someone that, sometimes I don't really want to go to work, but I feel very fulfilled and productive when I do go to work. I think it's something that is a little like hit or miss. Like some people, it's not something that resonates with them, but I think for most people, myself included, I need that structure. I want to feel like I'm putting input and I'm being productive somewhere. And that's really beneficial in recovery as well.
And Deanna, you're nodding your head. You agree with that,
Absolutely. For some people, the purpose of going to work is just so important to who they are, having that structure. And for some people, the purpose might be volunteering. The purpose might be getting up and creating art. But having something that resonates, that makes you want to get out of bed is so important. So I love the programming that NM does around helping people find what that purpose is for them and then supporting them in that.
No, that's great too. And again, we're quickly running out of time here, but I want to mention that the walk last year, the Be the One walk, were very symbolic, a 2.2 mile walk representing roughly the 22 veterans we lose every year. Suicide is considered the top facing issue of veterans, according to the National Veteran Suicide Prevention Annual Report. Estimated between 17 and 22 veterans or service members take their lives each day. The veteran suicide rate is more than 50% higher than the suicide rate for non-veteran adults, according to the American Legion. That's some shocking numbers. It really is.
It is. And from my understanding, they are going to do the Be the One campaign walk again this year. It will be in September. We're right now working to find out the dates of that and making sure. But the awareness that brings is so critical, because I think that people kind of skim over that veteran suicide piece sometimes. And so really bringing attention to it and how we can be supportive of our veterans is key. So future episodes will have more info about that opportunity.
And I love the symbolism. Apparently, Blooming Gardens last year, they donated 22 rocks. There were 22 rocks were carried by walkers on the course. The rocks were engraved with rock-solid sayings with the names of the veterans who had died by suicide. So what a wonderful thing. And if you want to learn more about that, you can call Cindy at 815-540-7364. Again, Cindy for the Be the One, 815-540-7364. Well, sadly, we've only scratched the surface, but I'm very excited that we have been able to scratch the surface today. Katie, in the future, want to talk about the suicide prevention clinics, and you're saying there's one coming up in August. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So our final session will be August 22nd. These are held at the Kishwaukee Hospital. In that lower level, there's a bunch of conference centers. If you're interested in signing up, saving a spot, these are free. But if you go to, I think the easiest way is checking out Ben Gordon Center's Instagram. We are constantly posting the upcoming trainings, resources, events, and the link is in the bio. So you can sign up, and it's a great way to learn about prevention from a clinical aspect and for those professionals. That last training will be a CALM session, CALM, counseling on access to lethal means safety. So how are we reaching out and we are addressing those lethal means when people are attempting suicide, especially veterans? We're looking at lethal means, we're looking at weapons and guns, and how do we address that?
Okay, and then a whole other aspect, I don't know if you heard, to do with now it's being proposed legislation in the Illinois Senate to allow people to commit suicide if they're given a diagnosis, 6 months to live, cancer diagnosis, something along those lines. And that opens a whole other kettle of fish there. But Deanna, I was impressed by what you said with this thing that's being put on the second annual suicide prevention. Northwestern Medicine, the Ben Gordon Center, the DeKalb County Community Mental Health Board, Northern Illinois University, and the DeKalb County Suicide Prevention Committee. I did not know there was a DeKalb County Suicide Prevention Committee. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So it's kind of something that's come and gone over the years, depending on who's saying, oh, we need to get together. But we had somebody from Hines VA last year say, you know what, we really need to be looking at suicide again. As you noted, we're seeing those trends. And so a group came together that just had so many people from the community who are really interested in talking about suicide. So as I mentioned, Project Seth, Suicide Prevention Services, which is in Batavia, NAMI, Association for Individual Development, NIU's Counseling and Higher Education, Safe Passage, Family Service Agency, Youth Outlook. Like, we have the right people talking about how do we prevent suicide. And Northwestern Medicine is the coordinator of that committee. And so there's always somebody looking at what can we do in our community to really highlight the need for suicide prevention and intervention. And so so this committee is doing that work.
They got the A-team ready there, I can see. That's great.
We do, and they have such a wide, vast knowledge and wide, vast network of people to talk to. And so things like the art show that's coming up on September 5th, supporting the Walk Out of Darkness, those kind of activities, that committee is really trying to amplify that so the community's aware of it.
And I want to mention the Seth Project because I have the honor of talking to Bartle Six, because I always have trouble saying their name, numerous times on the Suicide Prevention Show, and they've lost their son, and they've done so much to give back. And I know, unfortunately, we see this, Katie, where parents of somebody who committed suicide, oftentimes they'll get divorced because it's just too hard, because just you look at the other person and remind of the child. But they have, I don't want to say there's an exception to the rule, but they are just an incredible couple that they've done, and the projects they've done just been amazing.
And absolutely, and they talk about it.
Yes.
Just like you've been saying, TD, they talk about the loss of their son. They talk about how hard that was to manage after that. And then they're committed to making sure people are educated about suicide, that they're trained on how to be supportive in suicidal conversations. They are making sure that agencies have funding to do the work they do. So the folks at Project Seth really have, they have lived it, and they don't want anyone else to go through it. So they're doing everything they can to keep that from happening.
They're an amazing couple. They're really, and there's a bench there with Seth's name on it in Hopkins Park. I always say on a prayer whenever I go by that bench. I tell them that it's again very symbolic, because Seth used to like to ride his skateboard right down there. So, well, this has been wonderful. I want to thank you both so much for taking time to do this. And again, this is only the beginning here at the Suicide Prevention Show. You know, we won a couple of awards through the years, but the importance of doing the show, and I like to think we've saved some lives along the way, or at least got people thinking differently about suicide.
Absolutely. You're educating people all the time on that suicide is not something to be kept in the dark. We need to be talking. So thank you, TD, for bringing this to the public and keeping this conversation alive.
And Katie, one more time, tell us about the living room and how if we want to utilize those services, how can we do that?
Yeah, so living room, we're located at 12 Health Services Drive at the main Ben Gordon Center. So we're right next to the Cancer Center on the same campus as Kish. And you can just walk in anytime. If you're walking in through on our business hours, so like an 8 to 5, 8 to 8, you would just stop at the front desk and say, hey, I want to talk to the living room, and we'll take it from there. You can also give us a call at the main Ben Gordon number, which is 815-756-4875. If it's after hours, so you're calling us at 3 a.m, just hit 5 on the menu, and you'll be directed right to us.
And I wanted to end with you being from the Ben Gordon Center. I was so impressed when I learned who Ben Gordon was, that Ben Gordon had a hardware store. Actually, Gordon's hardware store is still there. And I guess my understanding was people would come, have coffee with Ben, and he'd talk about their problems and would work things out and kind of evolve from there. But a pretty amazing story.
Yeah, it is. And I'm going to brag on it for a minute. The Ben
Please.
Gordon Center was born out of the DeKalb County Community Mental Health Board. So the Mental Health Board was put together to provide funding to mental health, substance use disorder, and developmental disabilities. Ben Gordon was a member of that board, and then the actual Community Mental Health Center was born out of that. So it's pretty cool history there.
That really is. So did you know Ben? I didn't know when we lost Ben or when...
I did. It was actually, so the Mental Health Board's been around for 57 years.
Okay, all right.
So just about the time I came into this world, but there are a lot of people here who still remember that history, who were some of those original members and knew Ben.
That's just a great story. It really is. Well, thank you both so much. I want to thank Katie Sherman and Deanna Cada for coming by today. Again, suicide, don't be afraid to ask somebody if they're thinking about hurting themselves. That is the right thing to do. So thank you both so much for your time this morning. And that's the first TD Ryan Unleashed Suicide Prevention Show. TD Ryan Unleashed is brought to you by Scott Zyman, your State Farm insurance agent. Scott can help you save money bundling your home and auto insurance. Call 815-748-3101 or stop by at 2587 Sycamore Road, Suite D in DeKalb. Like a good neighbor, Scott Zyman and State Farm are there. Pizza Villa, pizza, pasta, sandwiches, and more at 824 West Lincoln Highway in DeKalb. For delivery or pickup, call 815-758-8116 or go to pizzavilla.com. My Insurance Guys in Sycamore, family owned, local, reliable. My Insurance Guys cover Medicare to auto and everything in between. Call us in Sycamore at 815-899-0950. My Insurance Guy, business, auto, home, life, and health at myinsuranceguy.com. And Elder Care Services of DeKalb County, safe, secure, and supported, helping you stay at home where you want to be. Call 815-758-6550 or stop in at 1701 East Lincoln Highway in DeKalb or on the web at ecsdecalb.org.